John Sweeney, the man with the orange hat in Kyiv. How's it going there?
It's calm. The sale of alcohol is, or the purchase of alcohol is forbidden. But this is my first rodeo, and I'm looking at a sea of bottles of Italian red that we just saw. So I'm in a bloody good mood. The headlines is that, as you know, Manuel, my policy is to go to the front line as little as possible, but every now and then it's kind of necessary. What I do is I go towards the front line as far as we can go, and then if we're stopped by the Ukrainian army, that's fine. And then but the point is, when you go back a little bit, you understand how the war is going. You have basically what you do is you go to the nearest gas station back from the point at which you said go back, and you hang out and you talk to people. It's a very simple way of checking how the war is going. And the good news is the Russian army is going backwards. So 2 days ago, we went to Brovary. And if you remember, I think on the 8th of March, the video appeared on something like the 10th of March. There was this astonishing drone footage shot by the Ukrainian army of a line of Russian tanks huddled together, all very clustered, coming down the highway towards Kyiv. This is from the north, and then they were hit by either Ukrainian anti-tank missiles from the ground or from drones. Nobody's quite sure. The first tank was hit, and what you can see is kind of like these black kind of ink blots coming towards you, and then suddenly the first one goes kapow, and then the seventh kapow, and then 3 and 4 burst into flames, and then the tanks kind of guide and gimbaled off into the wave and disappeared. And that attack happened in a place called Brovary, and that just before Brovary. Brovary is a big satellite town, which is something like 15 miles from the center of Kyiv. And about a week ago, we went and we were stopped before a town which is called, and I may get this wrong, but let's call it Karinivka, which is a little village, and we couldn't get into Karinivka. 2 days ago, we drove all the way through Karinivka. And by the way, you can tell that you're close to the war because normal, boring life disappears. No people walking their dogs, no kids on the streets at all, no old people shuffling about with their shopping, none of that. So you can sense it, that it's scary, and the Ukrainian army said go back. And I met this woman. I paid for a cappuccino, and behind us was this woman called Julia, and her mum paying for petrol, and she spoke beautiful English. And I said, can I talk to you? And I was filming her, and I said to Julia, what's it been like? Well, it was very, very noisy on Monday. But now it was quite so last night. And I said, you know the difference between incoming and outgoing? Outgoing, spawn bang, incoming Russian artillery, and you can feel it through your boots. You can feel the ground shake. That's the. And I said, when was the last time you felt incoming? And she said, oh, yesterday, and it was bad. And I said, what did you do before the war? Well, I'm still working, actually. I'm working remotely from home. And what do you do? Well, I'm in HR. I said, like a nice like. So this is the bravest HR person I've ever met. Who's carrying on, sort of checking people's CVs and saying, we'd like you to join the company, while feeling Russian artillery. But she was talking about, she's got friends and colleagues who are living in the villages which have been occupied by the Russians. And essentially what's happened is that they arrived with this armored column on March the 8th, and the column split up and hid in the villages, hiding inside the Ukrainian villages so that the Ukrainian artillery couldn't get them without killing its own people. And after a time, they ran out of their food and they weren't being resupplied. So the Russian soldiers became hungry. And I've already heard this from a taxi driver, but Yulia's contacts are telling her exactly the same story. The Russian soldiers went into one house and they basically took it over. The man of the house, they checked his phone and he hadn't got any pictures of the war on his phone, and so he was all right. They let him go with his wife and his kids, and they managed to get out. And the Russian soldiers were essentially taking over the Ukrainian homes and, effectively stealing their food, but not killing people. Yeah. But one of our other colleagues, and she said she couldn't verify it. This is a friend of a friend, so it may be a rumor. But what she said was that the Russians came. One guy who was drunk, he killed the man and he raped the woman. And separately, or it may be the same story. And it's impossible for me to verify this because of the cruelty, because of the chaos of the war. But separately, the Ukrainian Attorney General has said that there is, in a village near Brovary in this area, which is the east, it's the eastern front. They have got evidence, and they believe they've got the name of the Russian soldier who killed a Ukrainian civilian who was unarmed and then raped the woman. So that that's what's happening. But Julie went on to say that the Russian soldiers have gone back a little bit, but actually they're now encircled because the Ukrainian army has cut off their supply line. And we're hearing reports, and both the Americans and the British military are reflecting these reports that the same is happening on the Western attack as well. What I can tell you is very simply that the electricity is still on, the internet is still on. There's way more fresh fruit and veg and fish and chicken in the shops in Kyiv. Now, so that the story of the war is that it's, so like in Maltese terms, the letter is good. The war is in northern Gozo, but it's, it's nasty there. And then if you think about Malta and say Sicily, but as far away as whatever it is, Mariupol is, I think it's maybe 300 miles or something like this. I'm not sure, but it's a long way south from here. Like it's 14 hours on the train. The train is slow, but there the war is awful. And I know it's awful, but at the same time, it's honest and truthful to say that life is getting better in the center of Kyiv. There's less chaos. There are less checkpoints, and the mood, you can feel normality coming back. There are, the lovely Louis Armstrong song with sort of friends saying hello. There's that kind of atmosphere in Kyiv today, which is lovely and beautiful.
It's lovely, but is it realistic? I mean, it's the Russian army out there. It's true they haven't been performing to par or what is expected of them, but they're there, and they have a big boss chasing them and pushing them because his pride and his political survival depends on the capture of Kyiv.
I don't think the Russian soldiers want to fight this war. And the reason they don't want to fight this war is it's not their war and their heart isn't in it, which is why they're voting with their feet, which is why, and they're not being fed. So the fact that Vladimir Putin wants them to fight this war isn't enough. And you can see it on the ground. So that he's just like the Wizard of Oz. He's pulling his levers, but the levers aren't working. Now, yes, obviously the war started and it's continuing, and it's still very, very dangerous. But you can tell, this is what, the 30th day of the war now. And I put up on Twitter, a picture of me having a full Ukrainian breakfast in a cafe, and I name and identify the cafe opposite the Central Synagogue. Like I'm bang in the heart of town, and the Kremlin don't like me at all, and here I am. So I think that he is dangerous, but he's not being effective, and his military aren't being anything like as effective. The other thing is that the Western world has got it that they've got to help the Ukrainians fight Vladimir Putin and his army, because if Ukraine loses, then it's our turn next, because of the way Putin is behaving is a danger to our security and our way of life, full stop. And again, so Ukrainian air defense is something magical, but the electricity is still on and the internet is still on, and I can talk to you. So I'm not being a sort of Panglossian idiot here. The reason the electricity is still on is every time a Russian cruise missile tries to take out the power station, which is 15 miles east of here, on the east bank of the river, i.e. closer to the Ukrainian army than I am, the Russian army than I am, it gets shot out of the sky by Ukrainian air defense. The same with the Russian Air Force. The reason why they're not bombing Kyiv right now, and I'm half a mile from the presidential buildings. The reason why I'm not cowering in a bunker right now is because Ukrainian air defense keeps on shooting the Russian Air Force out of the sky, so much so that they're not coming here and they're not bombing. So this is an enemy which is cruel and brutal. And there are reasons why they've been much more successful in the south than against the capital. But it's not effective. Essentially, if you want to take out Ukraine, you take out the capital, you take out the head, and they fail to do so. And what they have got, the militarily, the story is different down south, because they've got the railway. They move very quickly, and they've got the railway, so they're moving trains loaded with tanks and fuel and food and ammunition from southern Russia, from Rostov-on-Don, lots of army bases on the Russian side, and the train can go all the way through occupied Donetsk into towards Mariupol. So they've got a kind of train, a railway station, just I would imagine, close to Mariupol, and they're using that to resupply their soldiers, which is working for them. And the problem for the Ukrainians is they're frightened to release too many troops from saving the capital, so that they can go and liberate the south. And that remains so. There are still, as we speak, there are Russian soldiers 20 miles from me right now in both directions, west and east. But what I'm hearing from the eastern side, which is my kind of area of expertise, if you like, I've been there twice, come on. But no, I'm now, having been there twice, I've got people's numbers, so I'm talking to them, and they're either encircled or they're pushing back, and it's increasingly less noisy, which means that the Ukrainians are hitting them. At the same time, I mean, yesterday or the other day, the Swedes announced that they were giving 5,000 anti-tank weapons to the Ukrainians. And then the British 3 hours later said, we're giving 6,000. It's like a kind of, it's a virtuous, it's a virtuous circle. So, and the West has got it. I mean, there are a series, anyway, so it feels that optimism isn't Panglossian and it's not foolish. It is well-based, and we'll see. But essentially, my view of this is primarily founded by my own observation of the fight in ordinary Ukrainians who I meet all the time. And I can list them now. So there's Julia, the woman in HR. the chief rabbi in the central synagogue, the fighting imam in a mosque, the pretty bloody terrifying Chechen commander who's fighting with the Ukrainian side against the Russians. And he told me, we've been fighting the Russian army since 1991. Like, okay. My taxi driver, guy, Vlad, the guy who drove me to, real fights. Eugene, my hipster translator, the world's worst translator, and on, and the hot air balloon pilot who's now a soldier who showed me the TV. All of these people weren't fighters before, apart from the Chechen commander, and now they all are. So that it feels like being in London in 1940. I'm not that old, before you make that joke. But it feels like it. What you've got is a democracy, which is now, in a sense, more militarized and more determined to win than the enemy that started the war.
If you were to listen to Russian pundits all the time, you think we're, if they feel like it, on the brink of nuclear war. Does the N-word come up in conversation with all these people?
So the problem is that the war here is so real. To think about a nuclear war is hard psychologically, and because you're fighting fear all the time on a kind of everyday level, then to think about a bigger, greater, and huge, a universal abstract fear feels psychologically a bit wrong. So it's hard. So I'm being open and honest with you. I find it hard to think about. I think Vladimir Putin is a rational actor inside a bunker so deep and so devoid of light and information. He doesn't understand the real world. He doesn't understand the modern world. And so, but as a rational actor, I do not think he wants to nuke the world. I mean, if he throws nukes, then he knows what will happen. There will be retaliation. And I think the Russian machinery, the Russian military machinery, may not serve him. So if he says, okay, we hit the nuclear button, he could well press that red button, but somebody has unplugged it from the mains. And I think that's a serious possibility. I also think the same of chemicals. If he uses chemicals, there is enough cooperation. The Ukrainians I said this on one of my video diaries yesterday, but I'll say it again. Vladimir Putin is fighting this war from inside the 20th century with 20th century methods. Tanks and armored cars and Nuremberg-style rallies. The strong man telling his people, the other are the enemy, the other here, the government here is drug-addled neo-Nazis. The Ukrainian side is fighting the war, its war, from inside modernity, from inside the 21st century. They're using drones and thermal imagery and jokes. The president is a comedian who has real courage, and you see him greeting his soldiers, going to the hospital, giving flowers to the injured, making videos, talking to parliaments all around the world. So the Russians are fighting for the past, from within the previous century, and the Ukrainians are fighting from within modernity, from within the 21st century. And there must be times, if you're a Russian soldier, it's as if you're fighting warriors who've come at you from the future. So there's a video I've seen, and I've shared it online to my followers on Twitter, which is, it's night, it's cold, the Russian armor, Russian tanks is hidden in a forest. but it's so cold they're running their engines because the boys inside are freezing. And the Ukrainians put up a drone equipped with a thermal imagery, and you can see all of the tanks, or their tank exhausts, white dots in the dark, and you see the dark of the forest, and then there's these white dots, and then Ukrainian artillery pinpointed by the drone to the very spot knocks out every single white dot, and then there's an explosion of light because the tank's boiling, frying the people inside it again and again and again. And the Russians don't understand this because they're hiding in the woods. Well, they can't, because drones and heat imagery heat-seeking imagery means that it's like following a burglar's footsteps in the snow. It's that easy. And more of this technology coming from the Americans and the Swedes and the British and the Germans and the French is coming every day, so that the Ukrainian future is building while the Russians are going backwards.
But doesn't this, I mean, without putting a normative value to it, but doesn't this justify the Russian argument that the West is already at war with Russia?
Well, I no, because no, that's nonsense. That's dark nonsense. Western values are simple: democracy, the rule of law, peace. And actually, those are our values. And essentially, if you accept those values, then you're part of the West. And the problem is that Vladimir Putin is against all of those things. And so it's not, I don't think that, and this is, I think things have changed because of the war and because of the high emotions. It's certainly true in my case. But I would say that the West before the war, wasn't interested in Ukraine. It was interested in standing up for democracy and the rule of law. And Putin's problem with a successful Ukraine, which had a successful democratic transition from one president to another, was that the consequence was it looked dark for him. If Ukraine could be successful, then why can't Russia be successful inside a democracy? So and Putin felt that his grip on power was weakened because of the success of Ukrainian democracy. And you could see the other day, northwest of Kyiv, Russian artillery smashed into a shopping mall, killing 8 people, including this beautiful Russian journalist called Oksana, who worked with Navalny's people. And she fled Russia for her own safety and then was killed by the Russian army in Kyiv. You know, irony. She was an extraordinarily beautiful woman with kind of dark russet hair, beautiful face, beautiful spirit, beautiful soul. And which is a reminder, this isn't Russia's war, it's Vladimir Putin's war. The idea is kind of simple, is that Putin doesn't want democracy to succeed because democracy and the rule of law were paying off for Ukraine, because that shopping center looked magnificent. I mean, like brand new and like an awful lot of money. And you get this flavor in Kyiv, which is a really beautiful city. It's full of fun, full of interesting and funny people and laughter all the time, and irony and so I know I've got great Russian friends. One of my friends I'd like to say is Alexei Navalny. He's the leader of the opposition, and he's just been sentenced to 9 more years on top of the stuff he's already doing. And this is nonsense. And he looks thin as a rake, and he may well die. But what's great about him is that he's kind of like Klaus von Stauffenberg, in that he's a reminder that there were Germans who stood up to the ferocity of the Nazi Führer, and there is Alexei Navalny and his people who have the courage to stand up to Vladimir Putin.
No, Sweeney, thank you very much. We'll see you again in a few days.
Good.